capital here. And if you remember the John the Baptist story, he's pushing up here, at least in Josephus' view. And Paul has to escape Damascus in the New Testament because of the representatives of this Aretas fellow, who was the king of Petra. They were all called Aretas. Now this is 100 years after the period we're talking about, but it would be Aretas the third, Aretas the fourth, Aretas the fifth, Aretas the sixth, and so on. So that's why they're all called Aretas, the kings of this Petra place. The Arabs are getting stronger in Transjordan, and then Herod's father, Antipater, is a Greco-Arab with ties to the Arab dynasty in Petra, and he makes connections with the Romans, and Hyrcanus is a weak person and allows him to basically make Hyrcanus a stooge of the Romans. Meanwhile, Hyrcanus and Aristobulus have fought a war together, a mini war, according to your Josephus here. And who won? Aristobulus, even though he's the younger brother. And who does the mother support? Hyrcanus, because he's the older son and he's not a lot of trouble and he's more Pharisee-minded. And she is, what's her name? Salome Alexander. She too has two names. So she, I'm sure she likes both of her sons, but she knows that her older son is popular with the Pharisees. And she's from a Pharisee family, apparently. And her brother is a famous Pharisee father who this gentleman can tell you about because he knows the Pirkei Avot, I'm sure. And this is Simeon ben Shetak, that's her brother. And once Alexander dies, and he would be a kind of Sadducee, purist Sadducee or revolutionary or nationalist Sadducee at that time, she takes the part of the Pharisees, and the Pharisees promote Hyrcanus. And I told you, in my view, those are the people willing to live with foreign power. Many extreme rabbinic groups to this day are willing to live with foreign power. There are some Hasidic groups in Israel who prefer the king of Jordan or the Palestinians to the Israel government because they don't like things that are done in what they consider, if Jews do it in an impure way, they don't approve of that. But if someone else behaves in an impure way, for them it is not important. So they're just as would rather live under foreign rule than risk incurring any, it's not, I mean, I understand how they think, but I don't think that that is particularly, how should we put it, particularly a kind of position that would make you feel proud of somebody. I'll put it that way. I mean, it's hard to feel that you'd be proud of, you know, if Himmler or Hitler or someone were around and you'd be willing to live under such a person rather than your own people because you felt that things were impure or so on. And, you know, they went, Yasser Arafat, people like that, they were quite willing to live under his authority rather than their own people. Okay, I understand that, but it's still not something that it's hard to really understand that. That's extreme Pharisee position, I think, come Rabbinic Judaism. But the Phariseeism here is clearly they are always willing, they don't want foreign power, but they're willing to live with it. They're willing to accommodate themselves to it. The extreme other nationalist groups are not. So this is the moment when Aristobulus too refuses to humiliate himself before Pompey, and he, in order to secure his ends, as Josephus puts it, and turns back. Later on, Aristobulus did try to make some accommodation and did go out to meet Pompey. What happened to him at that moment? A couple of paragraphs later on. Pompey took him prisoner. And then he gets involved in the war between Pompey and Caesar. You know, Pompey and Caesar fought a war at this time for control of Rome, a little after this. Why is Caesar assassinated? Do you know your Roman history? What's the date I told you of Caesar's assassination? 44 BC. This would be about 20 years after the events here. About 10 years after this, Pompey and Caesar make a deal. that they're going to sort of rule together. But they fall out and fight a war. And Pompey ultimately is defeated in Greece. It's covered in the, covered in the Roman historians. And he's killed in Egypt when he flees. And when Caesar pursues into Egypt, they give him Pompey's head, thinking that they'll conciliate Caesar. But he's very upset by that. He doesn't like people to be treated like that. And he kills the people, he executes the people who did this to, even though Pompey was his opponent. He was related to him by marriage. They used to secure their relationship by marriage. All that, by the way, as I told you earlier, is in the Rome series on HBO the first year. If you look at that Rome series, all those events are part of the background to the sort of upstairs-downstairs situation. In other words, they follow some Roman legionnaires in that battle, but they also follow the squabbles of the powerful people against, and the Roman legionnaires are for you to relate to on a personal level, but the powerful people are, the historical events are fairly good. So that's this period here, 60s to 50s BC. Well, so what happens to Aristobulus' supporters in the temple? This sets the stage for our period. They, as Josephus tells you, even though, by the way, Josephus is writing from sources, as we said last time here. But this, I think, is one of the most beautiful parts of his book. While the Romans were suffering severely, Pompey was amazed at the unshakable endurance of the Jews, especially the maintenance of all their religious ceremonies in the midst of a storm of missiles. Just as if deep peace enfolded the city, the daily sacrifices, offerings for the dead, every other act were meticulously carried out. Not even when the temple was being captured, they were being butchered around the altar did they abandon their service. Well, if you were a conquering army and you saw people behave like this, you would be full of admiration. That's what I mean. Pride or admiration for people's sacrifice. This is really, so these are the most zealous, if you want to call it, or at least purity-minded group. I would call them purist Sadducees, if you want to use a term that doesn't exist here. Josephus, but he gets this from sources. I told you last time I remember the name of the sources. Nicolaus of Damascus is one of the sources. He mentions it. Nicolaus of Damascus. And Strabo, the Greek historian, the Greek geographer, is another of his sources. He's like you. He's using sources. This Nicolaus of Damascus is is a Herodian diplomat who is in